The 2026 NFL season is here, and the schedules were released last night. And the Washington Commanders, folks, if you're a fan, it's going to be some tough slaying because this is a football team that picked up one of the tougher schedules in the NFL. And if you know me, you know I don't like talking about schedules in the NFL being tough because I think every team in the NFL, they're professionals, they get paid to do what they do. So you've got to show up every week or you're going to lose a football game. That's just the nature of the business. But when you look at this Washington Commanders schedule, it's brutal. It really is. And it starts off brutal. It ends brutal. I do think that they get a reprieve in the second half of the season, but they've got to come out swinging. They've got to come out throwing haymakers in the first part of their schedule. So before we get into that, as always, if you want to subscribe to this channel, all you have to do is hit that red button right down there and subscribe to this because you'll get a lot of great NFL content from myself, as well as you will get my radio show, which is on ESPN Radio. It's the Lake Lewis Jr. Show on ESPN Radio. So make sure you check that out. So let's get right into it, folks. Let's break it down. The first game of the season is the Philadelphia Eagles, and Washington travels to the Link to take on one of their divisional nemesis. And I got to tell you, this is a game for Washington where they can signal to the rest of the NFC as well as the NFL as a whole that they're there, that they're ready, that they're, the 2025 season was an anomaly. It it shouldn't have happened, so to speak. I think that they have a chance to get back to their winning ways, and they get a chance to do it early against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a 4:25 game, which means that the nation's going to be able to see Washington going up against the Eagles. Week 2, it doesn't get any easier. All you have to do is travel to Dallas, travel to Big D, and take on the Dallas Cowboys, your longtime arch rival. So Washington gets 2 big-time marquee NFC East matchups to start their season, and they're both 4:25 games, which means the nation will be watching. So Washington has a chance to signal to the rest of the world that they are there this year, that they've arrived. All right, so we move forward. Week 3, first home game for the Washington Commanders, and all they have to do is go up against the Seattle Seahawks, the defending Super Bowl champions. It's going to be tough, folks. They have a chance, though, again, just like the Eagles, just like the Cowboys in weeks 1 and 2. In week 3, they have a chance to signal to the rest of the league that they are a for real, legit football team. We do remember what Seattle did to Washington last year. Remember Jaden Daniels and that horrific elbow injury, the dislocation? Well, Washington and their players are going to be looking forward to this game to have an opportunity to show the rest of the world that they are a good football team. Week 4, we travel all the way over the pond and we end up at Tottenham Stadium, the legendary Tottenham Stadium in the UK, in London. Washington faces the Indianapolis Colts, and Washington will be the home team. So we still don't know which uniform they're going to wear out of the new duds, but we'll find out. Washington against the Indianapolis Colts, a football team that themselves feel like they have a lot to prove and that they should have been in the playoffs last year. But we remember Daniel Jones had the injury that derailed the Colts season. Well, the Colts look to be a much improved football team as well. So Washington's going to have their work cut out for them. So after those first 4 games of the season, if you're a Commanders fan, what do you want to see from them? Where should they be record-wise? I don't think they need to be 4-0 to be able to show people they're a good football team, but I do think they can't be any worse than 2-2. They're going to have to be playing 500 football after the first quarter of the season in order to really have a chance to, keep momentum going and show people that they are a good football team. All right, so let's keep it moving here. Week 5, they're at home against the New York Giants, and it's a 1 o'clock game, so a normal game against the New York Giants, another divisional game for the Washington Commanders. And if you think about this, if you think about over their first 5 weeks of the season, they will have played 3 divisional games, all against every team in the division. I don't think that's by coincidence. I think last year, going into the 2025 season, Washington was a darling to maybe potentially get to the Super Bowl. I know I had them as a Super Bowl favorite to get to the Super Bowl, and the injuries, Terry McLaurin holdout, it just never worked out for Washington last year. problem was they had a lot of primetime games that the league had invested into, and a game over in Madrid, Spain that we all went to. And Washington, most of those games didn't have the luster that they would have had because Washington had such a poor season. So the NFL didn't give them a reprieve this year. They made the schedule tough. Not as many primetime games, but nevertheless, the schedule is still tough. So Washington, after week 5, they will have played all 3 teams in the NFC East. Week 6 doesn't get any easier. As I said, this first half of the schedule is tough. They have the San Francisco 49ers, and we have to travel all the way out to Santa Clara, California for a Monday night football game, 8:15 start against the 49ers. And will that game be the Brandon Ayuk game? You know, because remember, Brandon Ayuk's been tied to the Washington Commanders. Myself, as an insider, has been saying that Brandon Ayuk will ultimately, yes, he will be a Washington Commander. But the question is, will he be a Washington Commander in time? Will he be a Washington Commander when they head out to face the 49ers? And my answer to that is a resounding yes. So I think all eyes is going to be on Brandon Ayuk and the Washington Commanders when they go out to San Francisco for a Week 6 matchup. And that's going to be on October the 19th. All right. After that, Washington has a bye. And then we'll talk about their next 2 games, and then we'll take a little bit of a break here. All right. So the next 2 games after a Week 7 bye are going to be on November 1st. And guess who they play again? Sunday Night Football against the Eagles. My goodness gracious. Doesn't get any easier, like I said. So they'll have 2 games against the Eagles in the first half of their season. And you go back to last year, they played the Eagles 2 out of their last 3 games of the season. And that was because you go back to 2024, both these 2 teams were the last 2 teams standing in the NFC. They faced each other in the NFC Championship game up in Philadelphia. And I think a lot of people, including myself, and I'm sure including you out there, felt like these 2 teams were going to be facing each other 2 out of 3 times to end the 2025 season with playoff and seeding implications on the line. It never matriculated because of the disastrous season Washington had. All right, so looking ahead here, November 1st, Washington against the Eagles. Moving along here, November 8th, Washington at home goes up against the LA Rams, and another Super Bowl laden football team, a team that just, 3-4 years ago won the Super Bowl. They were close to getting back there last year. Obviously, Seattle derailed that in the conference championship game, but the Rams feel good about themselves. Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua and company, they feel like they are the best team in football, and they'll have every bit of a chance to prove that. November 8th, they travel cross country. Those games normally don't fare well for West Coast teams, but it is a 1 o'clock game, an early game, so that kind of favors Washington in if you want to look for a silver lining against a tough Super Bowl ready type of football team. All right, moving along, Week 10, the New York Giants. Again, early, often they're playing these NFC East teams. So on November the 12th, an 8:15 Thursday night football game. I mean, they're lobbing them up here. They're giving Washington their love. They really are, primetime wise, but they're tough football games, so they're going to be playing John Harbaugh and company. All right, moving along. The next week, it's just a Monday night football game against a guy by the name of Joe Burrow, former Heisman Trophy winner at LSU. And guess what? Jaden Daniels beaten him before because they had that epic Thursday night game back in 2024, which kind of signaled the emergence and, the announcement of Jaden Daniels as literally one of these young guns in the NFL. Remember the tough catch from Terry McLaurin in the end zone, back of the end zone? That was one of those games that signaled Washington had returned as a new type of setup, new organization. That was a big win for them. They'll get a chance to do it again against the Cincinnati Bengals, but the difference is the game will be at home. It'll be at Northwest Stadium. All right, moving along. This is where I think Washington has a chance to kind of make up some ground if they've fallen behind or if they've already beat some of these really good teams we just talked about in their schedule. This is a chance for them to show that they're legit and they have a chance because they're going to travel week 12. They're going to travel out to Arizona to face the Cardinals. And remember, Mike LaFleur and company, new first-year coach for the Cardinals. they're going to have tough sleddings this year. I truly believe that. They're going to have some growing pains. I still think they'll be competitive. But this is a game, clearly, if you're Washington and you want to be a playoff team, you've got to win this football game. Moving along, the same thing for the next game on 12/6, which is December 6th, week 13, they're going to have a 1 o'clock game against the Tennessee Titans. They travel to Nashville. And again, Robert Saleh, former defensive coordinator for the 49ers, former coach for the New York Jets. He's now the lead man in Tennessee. And they have some young talent. They have Cam Ward. They went out and they drafted Carnell Tate, the great wide receiver, All-American from Ohio State. But I still feel like if you're Washington, this is the type of game you have to win if you want to be a playoff football team. All right, moving along. Week 14. This is a tough one, folks. It's at home, but it's going to be the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans brings that vaunted, great, perhaps the best defense in all of football, which I think they are. He brings them to town, and Washington's going to have their work cut out for them. But again, Houston's one of those teams that I have as a favorite to get to the Super Bowl out of the AFC, but they're going to have really good quarterback play from C.J. Stroud. And remember, he had that disastrous playoff game against the New England Patriots last year. We'll see by this time of the year, will he have rebounded, and is he leading the Houston Texans into this game as one of the favorites to get back to the Super Bowl? All right, so here we go. Moving along for the final 4 games of the 2026 season, we have in week 15, the Atlanta Falcons. Kevin Stefanski, new head coach. Tua Tagovailoa is the quarterback for this team. Will Michael Penix be back at that time? All that remains to be seen. But the Falcons do have some talent, but we'll see if Kevin Stefanski can get more out of them, than they had before. So we'll see what happens with this game in week 15. Week 16, Washington returns to the scene of a major crime on their schedule from last year, and that was the beatdown and bludgeoning of the 31-0 loss to the Minnesota Vikings, a game that we all were just up in the press box, couldn't believe what we witnessed. It was a game where it looked like guys quit. A couple of guys showed up late for the game. That was a disastrous outing before it even started. And then when we left the stadium, it was -10 wind chill factor. It was just a game no one wanted to be at. Well, guess what? We got to return there, and it's late in the season, which means it's going to be cold again, unfortunately. So Washington, week 16, they face the Minnesota Vikings. And then the final 2 games of the regular season for Washington is a week 17 matchup on the road. They travel from brutally cold weather to expectedly, it'll be nice and warm, nice and cozy. They travel to Duval because they're going to place the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence, Liam Cohen. This is a football team that made the playoffs last year. It feels like they've got a chance to get better and be a Super Bowl caliber team this year. So Washington's going to have their work cut out for them traveling to Jacksonville. And then the final game of the season, January 9th, it needs no introduction. It's the Dallas Cowboys. Washington closes their season out against their arch rival, the Dallas Cowboys. Week 18 game. The schedules for Jacksonville and for Dallas, just to let everyone know, we don't know the times or the days. Those are flex games, so they could be a Saturday or a Sunday. They could be a 1 o'clock or a 4 o'clock. So we'll have to remain to see what happens with those 2 games. But Washington closes out a daunting task of a schedule against the Dallas Cowboys. So what's your thoughts? What do you think the Commanders look at as far as a football team? I know the pads haven't started popping yet. We still have to see, some more moves that could be made, a la Brandon Ayuk or some other guys coming in. We don't know about the injury bug. But if you look at this schedule right now, I would say Washington would be hard-pressed to squeeze out 11 wins as one of the better teams. I think they're looking at probably 10 wins, maybe a 10-7 football team. And I think 10-7 could get you in the playoffs as a wild card, because a lot of the teams around the league have improved. So they're going to be knocking each other off in all the other divisions as well. So I think if Washington can get 10 wins, they'll make the playoffs. And 10 wins, not only get you in the playoffs, but it signals that you could be a dangerous team in the playoffs. Perhaps they could go on a run like they did in the 2024 playoffs, where they went to Tampa, knocked off Baker Mayfield and company, and then after that they went to Detroit and ended the dreams of Detroit fans who felt like the Lions were on their way to their first ever Super Bowl. Washington went up there and knocked off that football team. So Lots of stuff coming up. Remember, hit that subscribe button if you like the content. And remember, you can always check out the Lake Lewis Jr. Show on ESPN Radio. So, that was a heavy breakdown. Hopefully you enjoyed it with myself, NFL Insider, Lake Lewis Jr.